Hey everybody, you guys are too nice. You're too nice to me. Oh my goodness. I would like to hold space right here at the top to thank you for such a beautiful welcome and such an amazing service so far. I extend my thanks to Ed and Soledad and all of the people that have been helping me set this up, and of course Reverend Kindred for creating this space for me. I don't take it lightly at all. Thank you for welcoming me into your space. So, as shared, I'm Dylan. I'm here to chat with you guys a little bit about some of the meaning behind the work Faith in Florida is doing, some of my own convictions, some of the organization's ideas, and, I want to reflect a little bit on the importance of Black history and of class solidarity right now in this cultural moment. It was around this time, I think, last year when I found out that civil rights leaders, Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King, actually spent time in the Unitarian Universalist faith. This stunned me. I was completely unprepared for that fun fact. A little background about me: I'm a born-again Christian, pastor's kid and grandkid. I was raised in the fire and brimstone fundamentalism. I waltzed right into church ministry before my first tooth had even fallen out. I sang Go Light Your World. You guys know that tune? Carry your candle in the darkness. I sung that. My button down was way too big for me. I was in K4, my preschool graduation. And that was the first of many pulpits that I would sing and speak from. So, I was really steeped and entrenched in this Southern Baptist, progressive Baptist kind of tradition of, charismatic Bahamian churches. That's where I was born and raised. I then moved to the U.S. in 2016, where I did student ministry at an Assemblies of God college for the better part of 6 years. Even going as far as signing with the label, I was touring the country, y'all, preaching and singing to thousands of people, kids and adults alike, about this big, looming Father who would gather you up and coddle you and kiss you and give you all these blessings if you chose Him, and the Father who would surrender you to eternal damnation if you didn't. So you can imagine, I had my hands full, right? See, I actually have earlier memories of hell than I do of heaven. Of course, I've never actually been to either. This is the funny part about theology. But I'm talking about stories and jokes and messages, right, that I was picking up as a kid. I focused a lot on hell. This is how entrenched it was in our Christology at my church and within my family. My mother was a pastor. My granddad planted the largest church on our island, which doesn't have to be that large. There's 50,000 people on the island. But at the time, in my context, it felt very important. We grew up under a lot of public pressure and public scrutiny. So I thought a lot about hell, right? If you tell a kid about, option A being amazing and option B being torture, they're not really going to think about option A a lot, right? I spent so much time trying to avoid hell. I didn't even have time to, imagine heaven. Heaven could be anything, any prepubescent nightmare, eating broccoli, reading Hardy Boys novels, any of that could be considered heaven to me because I was so focused on not going to hell. So luckily I'm better now. The faith journey that brought me into a more liberal, pro-Black space is a journey I won't horrify you with the details of. It was traumatizing. I lost opportunities, I lost friends, lost money. I almost lost myself for a while. But this journey, it created a bit of a subconscious wedge between my Blackness and then these liberal ideologies that I was picking up, right? I held a deep belief that my Black identity was something and my secret little leftist beliefs was something else. The bell hooks buried at the bottom of my backpack in grad school, I didn't let my friends see it. All of that, lovey-dovey save the world stuff, that was for white people. So, I kept that tucked away for a serious part of my life, I say all this to say that I had a deep experience within the Black church and then a wild, dynamic experience with liberal theologies. And then suddenly found out that MLK, one of my literal role models, had found a way to reconcile the two. This guy doesn't believe in hell? Like, how is that possible? How could I not know this? You mean the same way he was my door to embracing pro-black ideas and economic reform ideas, he could have been my door to embracing universalism the whole time. Why had I held on so closely to the idea of a hell when someone I've studied inside out was spending all this time learning from and fellowshipping with people that had already let it go? Later on, I found Coretta Scott King's words that her and her husband had left Unitarian Universalism behind. Does anybody know why? Why they didn't remain in the UU church? She said, Coretta Scott King said, they didn't believe they could build a mass movement of black people with a faith group so liberal. Doesn't that sting? It was me. I and my kin are the people that MLK and Coretta was talking about. People so obsessed with eternal punishment and domination that we don't realize the ways in which it manifests directly in our lives, in our current economic and governmental realities. Punishment is pervasive, guys. Our prisons are a mass, carceral, and violent quest not set out to solve the issues of crime, but to disappear them, to isolate them. We discard criminals. That's how the system works. Our schools, with harsher and harsher violations of our learning liberties, enforced through punishment mechanisms in our state laws on our educators. Shout out to teachers. Y'all are fighting an unbelievable fight. I cannot thank you enough. It's amazing. That's a punishment mechanism, right? Not qualifying for an apartment or a car because your credit is too low. That is a punishment mechanism. My wife and I, our friend, he just a few months ago was let go from his job for challenging wage theft. That is a mechanism of punishment. Telling little boys they need to act, do, work, love, and think a certain way, or else they will be eternally separated from their Creator, that is a mechanism of punishment. Now, I know I don't need to convince you guys that there is no lake of fire. I know where I am today. What I do want for us, however, is to think critically about what the new outlets for these dominative and punitive beliefs might be. Reverend Kidron shared with me that you guys have been working through some of the material that Faith in Florida has been working on with Black history and ideas around white Christian nationalism. So I know at least a few of you understand that these dominative Protestant beliefs are baked into the fabric of this country and into the fabric of the West. We have internalized these ideas of live a righteous life. And you can swap out righteous for anything: correct, profitable, flashy, famous. Live a righteous life, or my soul be damned. And then we regurgitate it onto others. We write it into law. We normalize it from the playground all the way up to the Senate. This is why Faith in Florida is out on a mission to build a beloved community, to resist punitive ways of thinking, to leave behind these dominative ideas about what happens when we act out of line or when we are out of line, and instead choose radical love. This is why we're so committed to teaching Black history across the state and country, because we're interested in empowering each other, right? That's not just Black people, but everybody in this room. We're organizing, to be transparent, in hopes that Black history and our triumphs can unlock a new confidence in the oppressed Black person, of course. But to those who hold privilege and power, to those who actually unintentionally or intentionally oppress others, for white folks, you are ripe for liberation as well. It is also your turn to be free. It is also your turn to surrender your righteousness, to surrender the punitive instinct that you inflict on yourself, and to surrender your performance. Are you all still with me? Is this too deep? Okay, good. Something Alok Vaidmenon once shared still rings very true to my core, like the first time I heard it. He uses, transphobia. I think this can apply to a couple different forms of domination in the world, but specifically with trans folks, Alok believes that the reason transphobia is so rampant is because in order to enact violence on someone else, it is because you've perfected that violence on yourself. You've been told all your life how to be a man and how to be a woman. So then, of course, you're going to pass that on to the loudest rule breakers in your culture, trans people. This is the message that I'm getting at, friends, that we've all been poisoned by this thing we call domination. The slave trade, U.S. project, manifest destiny of the New World, whatever you want to call it, we have all been poisoned by the white Christian nationalist project, and the only way forward is class solidarity. The only way to move forward together is by understanding that we have more in common as working people than we ever will with the greedy and with those in power perpetuating violence and punishment regardless of things like skin tone and gender identity. Through Faith in Florida, I've worked in tenant protections to urge for right for counsel in this city, which we passed successfully. And I've worked in several elections and organized campaigns to bargain for public power in this county. And what I've realized in my years is that there are people of all shades and identities in greedy and powerful places. It doesn't mean that, we've beat racism. It doesn't mean that black folks still don't face institutional barriers in business and government. But what it does mean is that we need to start seeing how the project of racism and domination has evolved. This is a new hell, a hell that does not singularly scapegoat black folks, but tries to scapegoat all of us. The violent legislation that put my ancestors in bondage has sophisticated itself now to push down everyone in this room in service of profit, power, and control. We have new work to do, new healing to do. We need love. We need radical love. That means it's cultural, critical, political, social, revolutionary, bold, forgiving, empathizing, struggling, and courageous. It's about the courage to imagine, to defy, to be misshapen, new, exposed, uncomfortable, uncertain, but together. Together is foreign. Together is rare. Together is new. It's not something that the ruling powers are prepared for, which is why so much political and financial capital is spent on keeping us divided along lines like race and gender. From my deeper studies, I'd like to share with you that a universalist streak isn't the only thing that the textbooks are keeping from us about MLK. He had socialist letters and a gay advisor. Fred Hampton, who was the chair of the Panther Party, who is, known by a lot of Americans for being a pro-black extremist, was actually deeply committed to organizing Hispanic and white community members, running a breakfast service in poor neighborhoods, and sustaining thorough political education of the youth in the South. These things are buried for a reason, friends. This black history that is so often talked about is gay history, is poor white people's history. It is children's history as well. All of us have to heal. My friends, we must join together along class lines. This is the way forward, and the glue is courageous, radical love. I want to share with you a quote from a movie. The movie's called Mattawan. They got you fighting against colored, native against foreign, hollow against hollow, when you know there ain't but two sides in this world, them that work and them that don't. You work and they don't. That's all you need to know about them. Another quote by MLK: power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love. I don't think about hell that much these days anymore. What we have right in front of us is pretty bad. But for all the trauma that those beliefs caused me, I think the greater robbery was that I was so busy thinking about hell, I didn't get a chance to really imagine heaven. You're so bogged down by the status quo that you haven't even let yourself imagine free and fair housing, just elected officials, safe streets. Seriously, friends, when was the last time you imagined an abundant world, not harm reduction, not less bad apples and more good ones? When was the last time you actually imagined heaven, peace, safety, abundance in this here America, in these United States? This is the future that Faith in Florida is trying to bring, the kind of radical imagination and love that new world requires, togetherness. This is the work we need to do as a culture to graduate from these reiterations of dominant and punitive theologies, recycling hell over and over again, prisons one day, poverty another day. So my friends, I'll be in the back with some resources and a sign-in sheet. We can connect. I'd love to chat with some of you. You've all been really, really nice to me. And I formally ask you to imagine heaven with me. In the name of the Creator and all those connected, amen.